Olivia Graves crouched low, the cold, metallic floor of the Zol warship pressing against her knees as she peered through the narrow crack in the bulkhead. The hum of the warship's engines reverberated through the walls, a constant reminder of the infernal machine that surrounded her. The Zol Empire's greatest weapon, the star-crushing warship Valkyrath, was their pride, an impenetrable fortress in space, or so they thought. But Olivia knew better. She exhaled slowly, her breath a silent whisper against the thick air of the warship's hallway. The dim lighting cast long shadows along the walls, and a faint metallic scent clung to the air. The ship was immense, a sprawling labyrinth of corridors and chambers, all guarded by Zol soldiers, tall, armored brutes with eyes like obsidian, trained to crush any threat. Every step inside this colossal machine was a calculated risk, but Olivia had never been one to back down from a fight. Her mission was clear: infiltrate the heart of the warship, plant explosives in its core systems, and cripple the Zol's plan to annihilate the human resistance once and for all. She wasn't alone, of course. Her comrades in resistance had been working tirelessly for weeks, but it was Olivia's courage and skill they were counting on. She was their best chance. "Move, Olivia," she muttered to herself, pushing aside the nagging doubt in her mind. Her fingers tightened around the data chip in her hand, a key to access the warship's control systems. She had to get to the central command room. Just ahead, the hallway split into two. On the left, a patrolling guard with a plasma rifle turned the corner. Olivia quickly ducked back, flattening herself against the cold wall. Her heart raced, her body tense with the anticipation of being discovered. She had no time to hesitate. Her fingers brushed the small device at her belt, activating the cloaking module embedded in her suit. A faint shimmer rippled through the air, and in a moment, she was invisible to the naked eye. Her footsteps were silent as she moved through the shadows, her body blending seamlessly with the warship's metallic environment. The guard passed by without noticing, and Olivia exhaled quietly, relieved. But there was no time to relax. Every moment spent on this warship brought her closer to the most dangerous part of her mission: General Zorith, the ruthless leader of the Zol Empire. His ego had grown too large, his cruelty too overwhelming. He was the reason her family was dead, the reason so many innocent lives had been lost. She had to stop him. "Focus, Olivia," she whispered under her breath, the words steadying her nerves. She moved deeper into the warship, her eyes scanning every hallway, every shadow. The Zol had sophisticated surveillance systems, but she was prepared. Her knowledge of their tech was extensive, and with each turn, she disabled cameras, hacked into their security grids, and bypassed biometric locks. Each success brought her one step closer to her goal. The ship's corridors grew narrower, darker, as she approached the inner sanctum of the Valkyrath. She knew she was getting close now. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and she could almost feel the weight of the alien warship pressing down on her. It was a massive thing, larger than any ship the humans had ever built, its design an architectural nightmare of cold precision. It was built to crush, built to dominate, and had succeeded for far too long. As she neared the entrance to the central control room, the pressure mounted. She had already disabled the ship's outer defenses, but there was one final challenge. Zortha's personal guards, the elite soldiers who protected the heart of the warship. They were unlike anything she had faced before. One shot, one chance. Olivia thought, her hand moving instinctively to her sidearm. She crept forward, heart pounding as the guards' voices grew louder. She could hear them talking, Zol language guttural and foreign, their voices harsh but confident. They were waiting for something, perhaps for Zortha's orders, or for their next attack on the human colonies. Olivia's got twisted at the thought. The stakes were too high now. The galaxy would burn if she failed. With a swift motion, she disabled the security door and slipped inside the command room. The room was illuminated by cold blue light. The controls scattered across the walls in a disorienting array of holographic interfaces. At the center of the room, a massive screen displayed a map of the galaxy, with human resistance territories marked in red. Olivia's gaze narrowed. It's all about to end, she thought. She moved quickly to the control panel and inserted the data chip. As it slid into place, a series of beeps echoed in the quiet room, signaling the start of the countdown. Her plan was set in motion. disrupt the warship's weapon systems, and send it into chaos. System breach detected. A cold, mechanical voice echoed. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. It was too soon. She turned around, her pulse quickening as the door to the command room hissed open. The elite guards stood in the doorway, their faces concealed behind heavy, dark helmets. Their weapons were trained on her, their presence menacing. She had expected this, but it didn't make the reality any less terrifying. One of the guards stepped forward, his voice deep and chilling. "You think you can stop us, human? You think you can change the fate of the galaxy with a few words?" His words dripped with contempt, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. They had underestimated her. They still did. Olivia didn't flinch. Her hand hovered over the trigger of her weapon. She had one shot, one chance. Without a word, she pressed a button on her wrist, activating the EMP pulse that would disable their weapons. The guards' weapons sputtered out of existence, their systems fried in an instant. "Now," Olivia muttered, and without hesitation, she turned and sprinted toward the control panel, fingers flying over the holographic interface. The countdown began, and the warship systems began to crack under her influence. But as the countdown reached its final seconds, she heard the voice she had been dreading. "You cannot stop me, human." General Zortha's voice echoed across the ship, his deep tones filled with icy confidence. "The galaxy belongs to Zol." Olivia didn't hesitate. Her voice was steady as she spoke the one word that would change everything. "Watch." And with that, the warship shuddered, its fate sealed, and the Empire began its fall. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, every footstep reverberating in the hollow corridors of the Valkyrath. The warship was alive with the sound of its alien occupants, the hum of its engines, and the rumble of its immense, uncaring power. Her cloak flickered in the dim lighting, the last remnants of her invisibility shield slowly starting to fade. She had no time to waste. The countdown had begun, but Zorth had already noticed the breach. The ship would go into lockdown soon, and when it did, every inch of this cold metal fortress would turn against her. Her hand rested on the weapon at her side, fingers brushing the cool surface of the EMP pulse emitter. It had worked before. She couldn't afford another failure. The control room was still a blur of flashing lights in her mind. The map of human territories, the explosive countdown, and the cold, unyielding voice of Zorth. "Watch," she had said, but she knew the battle was far from over. This warship would fight back. Zorth would fight back. The metallic walls of the corridor seemed to close in around her as Olivia advanced, her breath shallow, her every sense heightened. She was no longer a simple soldier. She was a ghost in a steel behemoth, and her mission had only just begun. Zortha's forces were now aware of her presence, and the hunt was on. She rounded the corner sharply, her back pressed against the wall as she slid into a small alcove, just in time to avoid a patrol of Zul soldiers. Their footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate. Their armor gleamed in the dim light, the clicking of their boots a rhythmic drumbeat. They were talking in their guttural language, their words harsh and unintelligible, but there was something in their voices, something tense. They were on edge. Zorth was already taking matters personally. "Where is she?" one of the soldiers growled. The voice was deep, and though she couldn't understand the words, Olivia recognized the anger in the tone. She held her breath, barely daring to move. The soldiers passed by without noticing her, their weapons swinging on their backs, but Olivia knew they wouldn't be the last to come. The warship was now a prison, and she was a prey. Olivia didn't wait for them to get too far. Her cloak reactivated, the shimmer hiding her from sight. She moved quickly, darting between shadows, careful not to make a sound. The stakes had been raised, and her mind was razor-sharp. She had one shot at getting to the core systems before Zortha's elite guards found her. Her communicator buzzed softly, an encrypted message from the Resistance. She slowed, slipping into an abandoned maintenance room. A glance at the screen confirmed her suspicions. The Zul were closing in, and they had already started scanning for any intruders. The countdown timer on her device had been reset. She had less than 15 minutes. A sudden, sharp noise made Olivia freeze. It was the unmistakable sound of a heavy door opening. She peeked around the corner of the room. only to see another patrol. This time, a group of 4 Zol soldiers, armed to the teeth. They were scanning the area, their eyes narrowing as they moved. Zorath had deployed his best men. She didn't have the luxury of hesitation. With swift precision, Olivia dropped to ground, crawling through the shadows until she reached the maintenance hatch leading into the lower deck. She knew the air ducts ran parallel to the warship's main arteries. It was her only chance. If she could navigate through the ducts, she could bypass most of the patrols and reach the engine room before Zorath realized she was as close to the heart of his empire. Slipping into narrow duct, she pushed herself forward, using the dimly lit shadows as cover. The heat in the vent made her skin prickle, but she kept moving one slow and calculated inch at a time. The air inside was stifling, and the walls of the ship seemed to close in on her as the metal groaned under pressure. She listened carefully, her focus narrowing as the Zol's presence intensified. Their chatter echoed through the vents. They were tracking her, their patrols becoming more frequent. Zorath had underestimated the human spirit, but she was beginning to understand that his ego could be his greatest weakness. Finally, she reached the hatch that would lead her to the ship's engine room, the heart of its power. It was heavily guarded, but Olivia was prepared. She drew the last of her energy from the EMP emitter and activated it silently. The nearby systems flickered, and the guards' weapons powered down. She had them. Stepping into the dimly lit engine room, she froze. The hum of the core vibrated through the floor, the pulse of the ship's engines quickening with each passing second. The room was a vast, intricate network of pipes, wires, and machinery. Alien tech that pulsed with menacing glow. She had seen the blueprints, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer scale of it. Olivia Graves. A voice echoed through the chamber, sending a chill down her spine. It was Zorath's voice, cold and predatory, as though he had been waiting for this moment all along. "You truly believe you can stop me?" She spun, her eyes narrowing as she saw the figure standing in the doorway, tall, armored, and every inch the imposing figure of a conqueror. General Zorath, his cold, black eyes locked onto hers, and a sickening grin spread across his face. "You've made a mistake," he said, his voice echoing through the room. "You think you can challenge the might of the Zol? I am the Empire. This ship, this war is mine to control." Olivia didn't flinch. Her hand moved to the detonator strapped to her belt, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. She had no choice now. She was out of options. "Then it's time for your empire to crumble," she said, her voice steady but fierce. For a moment, silence hung between them. Zorath's grin widened. "You've already lost, human," he sneered, stepping forward. "No one can stop me." Olivia's thumb pressed a button, and the ship groaned, its systems flickering as she activated the final phase of her plan. The countdown continued, but now it was personal. Zorath's empire would end, not by her hands alone, but by the hands of every human who fought for freedom. "Watch," Olivia whispered, her eyes never leaving his. And the warship's engines began to falter. The battle for the galaxy was far from over, but the first crack had appeared. The warship Valkyrath groaned as if it could sense its own impending doom. Every inch of the massive vessel shook, the engines flickering, the lights dimming in irregular pulses. The pulse of power that had once seemed unstoppable was now faltering, a sign that the might of the Zol Empire was beginning to crack. Olivia felt the tremors reverberate through her body, and for the briefest moment, she allowed herself a breath of relief. She had done it. The plan was in motion. The countdown had begun, and the Valkyrath was no longer the unassailable fortress it had once been. But there was no time to savor the moment. Zorath's voice echoed through the halls of the warship, vibrating with menace. "The human has activated the systems," he announced, his voice dripping with both fury and disbelief. "Seal the ship. Find her. Bring her to me." Olivia moved quickly, her pulse still racing, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The engine room was no longer safe, and the ticking clock in her mind pushed her forward. The countdown had only minutes left. She couldn't stop now, not when everything was so close to unraveling. She needed to get to the control room, the central heart of the warship systems. Before Zorath could regain control, she slid through the narrow hallways of the Valkyrath, each corner more perilous than the last. The lights overhead flickered sporadically, casting long, haunting shadows. The usual sterile hum of the ship was replaced by the panic clatter of soldiers moving through the corridors, their voices tense, their footsteps louder now as the ship descended into chaos. Olivia's mind raced as she moved through the darkened hallways. Zorth had always believed that his empire, his machines, were invincible. That belief had made him arrogant, and now that arrogance was his downfall. He had underestimated humanity's capacity for defiance, for resilience, for a single person to make the difference. Her fingers brushed the surface of the walls, guiding her through the shadows. Her pulse settled into a steady rhythm, her focus sharpening with every step. She had learned to live in the quiet moments of chaos, to survive in the silence between the storms. This mission was no different. She would succeed or die trying. A low growl of static crackled in her earpiece, an encrypted message from her team. Olivia, came the voice of one of the resistance leaders. We've intercepted Zorth's communication. The ship's going into lockdown. If you don't reach the control room in the next 5 minutes, we'll lose the entire ship. Understood, Olivia replied, her voice calm. I'm on my way. She closed the communicator and picked up the pace, moving with the urgency of a hunter closing in on her prey. Zorth had no idea what was coming. He still believed that he was in control of the situation, still thought that his empire would crush the human resistance underfoot. He hadn't learned yet that even the smallest crack could bring the entire structure to its knees. The command center was just ahead. She could feel the weight of it now. This was the heart of the Valkyrath, the place where all of Zorth's plans were carried out, the place where the war's final decision would be made. It was heavily guarded, of course, but Olivia had anticipated that. The soldiers posted in front of the door were no different from the hundreds she had already evaded. Her hand rested on the pulse weapon at her side, her mind calculating the best way to approach. As she neared the entrance to the control room, she pressed herself into the shadows, listening to the murmurs of the guards. They were speaking in their native tongue, their voices low and distracted. Olivia didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward, cloaking herself in the shadows once more. She moved quickly, silently, and before they could react, she was upon them. A single, precise shot from her pulse emitter, and the guards were disarmed, their weapons sizzling harmlessly to the ground. With the guards neutralized, she moved into the control room, her heart hammering as she approached the central interface. The room was large, lined with rows of alien technology, holographic displays flickering in the dim light. At the far end of the room, the large command chair was empty. Zorth had not yet arrived, but the silence was shattered by his voice, echoing throughout the room. You think you've won, human? Zorth's voice resonated from the ship's loudspeakers. You have no idea what you've set in motion. Olivia's eyes narrowed as she rushed toward the main console. The countdown was still ticking, but the ship was already beginning to lock down. The control systems flickered on and off, and the security protocols were engaging with terrifying speed. Zorth wasn't just a leader. He was a machine, a cold and calculating mind that would stop at nothing to maintain his empire. As Olivia's fingers flew over the control panel, she saw the flashing red alerts. Security breach detected. Lockdown initiated. All systems under Zul control. She cursed under her breath. Zorth had already activated the fail-safes. But then, something unexpected happened. The console before her blinked and flashed, a new set of commands appearing on the screen. Human override detected. Command accepted. Olivia froze. The resistance had managed to infiltrate the system remotely, sending a countersignal to Zorth's control systems. The ship's systems, already in disarray, were now being turned against their creator. The lights in the room dimmed, and a low rumble filled the air. The countdown timer slowed, then stopped entirely. Zorth's empire was on the brink of collapse. For a moment, Olivia allowed herself a breath. She had done it. She had brought down the most powerful warship in the galaxy with nothing but a few words, a single action. But her victory was short-lived. Zorth's voice returned, this time low and venomous. You cannot stop what is already in motion, he sneered. The Zul Empire does not fall to a mere human. Before she could react, the doors to the control room slammed shut with a deafening clang. Olivia turned, her pulse quickening as she saw the silhouette of Zora standing in the doorway, flanked by his elite soldiers. "You've made a fatal mistake," he said, his voice filled with icy rage. "This warship will be your tomb." Olivia stood tall, every muscle in her body tensed, every inch of her focus on the warlord who had caused so much destruction. She knew it wasn't over. The battle for humanity's survival was just beginning. She had set the stage for the end of the Zol Empire, but the final act would take more than just one word. With a grim smile, Olivia gripped her weapon tighter. It wasn't over yet.